I think community organizing, in my own words, is a way of addressing social injustices or social problems by going straight to the community. Because again, the way I phrased it was that people closest to a problem are those closest to the solution. So if you want to create actual change, you have to, first of all, always go to the people whom you are trying to help. And I think that, in my opinion, is community organizing, rising with many leaders, because you're going straight to the community.
Ultimately, organizing is pushing towards making a demand, a specific change that needs to happen for the community's betterment, to the decider, whoever is in a position that their decisions either can enable that thing to happen, or if they decide to block it, it won't happen, and we need to make sure they're not going to block it.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to the Phoenix Generation podcast. This is part 2. So if you're joining us, you can listen, but I would highly recommend that you rewind one episode and listen to part 1. We're gathered here again today with Derek Doe, who's a fellow in our office and also has done amazing research and internships and runs his own nonprofit called the Community Tent, which works on reducing homelessness in Ghana. And Dr. Jeremy Posadas, who is in his 4th year at Stetson University, working there as the Marchman Chair for Civic and Social Responsibility. And we have been talking a little bit about how do youth, but honestly all of us, actually become change makers or community organizers about an issue that we care about. So just in case we have first-time listeners, remind us again, and I loved both of your definitions. You guys hit me up a little bit with your definition of what community organizing is, and maybe also what the 5 steps are for the framework.
Sure, yeah.
Oh, my definition. I think community organizing, in my own words, is a way of addressing social injustices or social problems by going straight to the community. Because again, the way I phrased it was that people closest to a problem are those closest to the solution. So if you want to create actual change, you have to, first of all, always go to the people whom you are trying to help. And I think that, in my opinion, is community organizing, rising with many leaders, because you're going straight to the community.
Great.
Yeah, that's great. And I would add that there's a focus in community organizing of working towards dismantling the underlying causes of things, working in the community to then figure out how to, in the long run, dismantle the underlying causes, not only addressing the effects. And the 5 steps that you pointed to are the framework we've developed to work with youth and train them as in the beginning of community organizing. So the 5 steps are: gather more leaders, listen and learn, strategize, act, and reflect. And we think of this as a cycle. It's not a one time and done, but rather as a cycle for, as we talked about in our last episode, expanding the leadership abilities within the community, expanding people's skills to challenge what they see going wrong in their community, and ultimately channel their anger at what's wrong towards smart and strategic action to then get to the joy of the world that they want to build together.
Wonderful. I love that. Yes, and we talked a little bit about, I love, this idea that, there is really the capital of this, the trick is the relationships, trusting relationships, genuine, on the ground, trusting relationships. And love that the first step is actually gathering people instead of gathering data. Not that gathering data isn't also important, but that we can be the most focused on the data we need to gather if we start by a listening approach, right? And this listening approach, as many of you know, is one of the fundamental focuses of the Phoenix Generation, is that if we could pause and listen to each other a little bit more, we could more quickly get to solutions, whether that's interpersonal or community-wise, if we actually spent some time listening before we took action. I also love that you shared sometimes for youth, but again, for all of us, when we see an issue that we care about, that we're frustrated with, action is like what I want to do. I want to get to action. And I feel like this has been an issue for so long, someone just needs to do something. So I'm ready. And that at times, I don't think that means the process has to be super slow, but taking this process of these stages in order to gather more leaders, listen and learn. So now I've gathered more leaders. I've deeply listened on the ground to what's happening. I've started to learn, like, what is the data telling me? What are like-minded organizations, finding out? now tell me like what I'm ready. I'm going to strategize. I want to really start to move things. What do I do in step 3?
Right. And so the key is step 3 is not act. We're still not at action yet.
Right.
And it might feel like slow, but one of the reasons this is really important to me whenever I'm working with young people is that it's really easy to want to think, okay, let's get out there and do. But if we're not smart and strategic, we're going to use up people's energy pretty quickly.
Right.
And so we really want to encourage for long-term impact being really strategic. The strategic side is really about correctly identifying 2 things, the demand and the decider. And what I mean by that is when we say a demand, ultimately organizing is pushing towards making a demand, a specific change that needs to happen for the community's betterment, to the decider, whoever is in a position that their decisions either can enable that thing to happen, or if they decide to block it, it won't happen, and we need to make sure they're not going to block it. But more particularly when we say demand in community organizing, we mean you choose a specific aspect, a specific part of the problem to start with. Whatever the problem is that the community is most focused on, or there may be multiple problems, you don't just pick one area, you have to pick a specific aspect of it. We sometimes use the language of cutting an issue. And a metaphor that came up my first year of teaching on this is think about like a pizza, right? We all, many of us love different kinds of pizza. And if you love pizza, you of course, you want to eat the whole thing, but you have to like slice, like cut a slice of the pizza to start eating, right? So it's really important in community organizing that we strategize around picking one part of the problem to work on first, right? For a number of different reasons. But cutting that first issue out that you're going to work on helps people know where to begin working. And Derek, I'm just curious for you, like, you know, in your work, why has it been so important to like identify particular issues?
Well, like as I said before, I started grand and ready, and then I hit a wall, and I had to come back to the drawing board. And I think I also did the pivoting right around taking the same class as of like cutting an issue, because I realized I was trying to tackle the whole housing insecurity, homelessness. It's a big problem. And again, as we said before, it's layered. So there are multiple things involved in it. So I think to me, cutting an issue was more about boiling it down to, let me just say the story of how I even pivoted. So I was coming from your class, I think I was walking about across Woodland Boulevard to campus. And then I realized, why am I trying to like abandon houses and get people in when I could just follow suit on my personal story? That there are people just like me who grew up in those environments, but they are still dedicated to their education. They want something better for themselves. They want something better for their communities. They're still struggling in school or struggling in their neighborhoods, but they're still persistent somehow. So why, instead of like just trying to get them a house and put them in there, which is challenging in the first place, why don't I focus on my personal story, which is, again, the story of so many other youths I grew up with in the neighborhood? Why don't we take those people, train them on how to organize around their issues, and then give them like the necessary tools? We give them funds to stay in school, because there are lots of trade-offs that people have to do when you grow up in such environments. And one of them is stay in school, or you go get money to help the family or something like that. So why don't we give them some amount of funds to stay in school, and also train them on organizing, how they could look at their situations through a different sort of lens, and then how can they organize around it? And we have like micro grants that we give them to, again, go into the community, do all the steps that we have. And that to me, I think, was cutting an issue, because I realized I couldn't necessarily just go straight to the big and grand infrastructure that was causing the problem of housing insecurity. But I could start with the people that were most affected by it, the people that were falling through the cracks. And to me, it was people very personal to me, people I grew up in the neighborhood with. So that was, in my mind, that is cutting an issue. That is like boiling it down to a specific thing that was actionable. And good for me, when I did that pivot and cutting the issue down, I was able to get the funding. I still have the voicemail on my phone when you called and said it's going to be possible to channel the programming funds to the program that I was thinking. And to me, it just felt like it happened at the right time. It's like when you're able to cut an issue where it looks more feasible, more actionable, things happen for it to work. Before, when I was thinking of the big infrastructure, when you pitch it to everyone is like, oof, like, how do we do this? How do we do this? But when you boil it down to one specific issue, it just so happens that people see a pathway and it's easier for people to organize around it. It's easier for people to feel like this is something they could get on board with, because it's easy to find people like that. It's easy to train them, and it's easy to see how they could impact their communities, because we build that into the structure of the program. And that's how I think I have experience with cutting an issue down, taking the whole go big or go home idea into like, let's start small. Let's start with people, the most people affected by it. And they are in those communities, they are in those environments. Let's empower them. Again, like I said, community organizing is also about empowerment. Gathering more leaders is also about empowerment. Empowering them to then go back to the environment and see, now with this new added lens of how to tackle problems, how can we dismantle the infrastructure?
If I could add too, just to highlight something you pointed to, Derek, when we talk about, we can't address the whole problem all at once. We have to pick one aspect of it. In community organizing, we have a couple of different things we pay attention to know what to focus on first. And you've kind of implicitly pointed to them. So one of them is, it has to be something that is widely felt in the community. It has to be something where there's broad desire in the community to address this, right? If it's if it only affects a narrow portion of the community, you're not going to be able to bring everybody together.
Right.
So it needs to be something that's widely felt. It also needs to be something that can be realistically won right now, right? You can't win everything all at once. You have to choose based on our current strength, the current relationships we have, based on what we know about the power structure right now, what's winnable feasibly right now. And you have to start with what you can win right now, because you have to give people a sense of their own power. So you start with where you can win. You kind of stretch as far as you can, but still be realistic to give people a sense of their own power. And then the third thing you think about is, if we pursue this goal, is it going to allow us to build everybody's skills more? Because what you want is not just to win this thing. You want the group to feel and to have the abilities to then pursue the next thing. So that each time you go through it, and every time whether you win or you don't win a particular goal, you've built the skills to work towards the next goal.
I love that. I love that the capacity building, the educational components, the empowerment components are built in to the action building process. You know, I'm thinking of an example of this when I was working at Stetson, and I was working with career services, and one of the staff members at the time was also a veteran himself, and his son was also in the military. And we were looking at the data of the students who were veterans and often had to drop out of school. And we were talking about that, and he said, you know, I've been talking to some of those students, and I know why they leave, because they come and talk to me. And I was like, okay, tell me more. Well, usually a career issue. You know, if there's a financial hardship in their family, they're going to go to work. Like they're not, that's no other option. They have this, and they have this, you know, sense of loyalty to their family that's really responsible. And I said, wow, okay, is there anything we can do about that? And he thought about it, came back to me the next week and said, you know, I've been talking to some of them and thinking about it myself. Would it be possible for any of the veterans who go here, if their spouse also needed career services or was going to be laid off, could they have access to that? Because if their spouse could also stay employed, then they could stay a student. Yes, we could do that today. Like, how many people are we talking about? Absolutely. I loved this solution. First of all, something I never could have come up with. It was a cut of a cut. It was a small, it seems like a small thing, but to the group, it felt huge. And they felt like, oh my gosh, we came up with an idea and within like 2 days, someone said you could do it. That's amazing, right? So I think, that's really interesting to be able to make something feel tangible. Allen Ginsberg, who runs the Ginsberg Family Foundation, who I adore, says sometimes, which always cracks me up, like, yes, okay, we cannot boil the ocean. Like you're saying, we have to pick apart or else it will just feel frustrating. He said, also, you don't want to feel like you're peeing in the ocean. Like you want to feel like you're making an impact, an actual impact, right? So, okay, I think we're getting close to feeling like maybe we can act. How do we do that in such a way that we do feel like we're not boiling the ocean? So we've cut it up, we've picked something. We've also decided who we need to share this with to potentially make change. So now we're there. How do we make sure also so that Allen Ginsberg stays happy? We also can't be peeing in the ocean. So how do we make sure that we're doing the right work when we act?
Yeah. Yeah. So part of it is you have to think carefully about what's the power structure, who's in power, who's in a position that can either enable or block your change. And then you have to think about what are their relationships? Who are they connected to, who can be an ally to you to help them understand the change that needs to happen? It is true that some of the work involves confronting leaders and decision makers and demanding a change. Again, it's not based on violence, it's not based on intimidation, but it is based on helping people in positions of authority and decision to understand what the community really wants.
Sure.
The kind of actions that need to happen aren't just about being loud. They're about showing how widely the community is angry about something and how much of the community is unified to try to change something. So you need to think about who can ultimately make the decision, who influences them, what issues influence them, and also about being willing to go to them and say, this is the change we want.
Right.
And we, the community, stand together to force this. The other challenge is it's never just one action.
Right.
It's about building the staying power to come. So it might look like it's not just one county council meeting. It might be 3 or 4 in a row where you are repeatedly gathering your community to come together to show the county council, no, this is a real issue that many people in the community. The other thing, and this is where dialogue comes back, is you constantly need to think about how do you gain more allies. And part of gaining more allies is thinking about what are other groups in the community who have issues that you can support so that you recognize a shared goal, a shared vision. Right?
Sure.
So the changes that can build more allies are changes that can build everybody's collective power. And how do we show up for each other in the community? Again, not in a transactional way, but in a relationship-based way, right?
Sure.
A sense of we're committed together. So again, it's identifying the power structure, identifying how to effectively influence that power structure, but also how do we expand our allies within our community and then our broader community.
Sure.
I think what what I'll add to that is, especially when it comes to identifying the power structure, and what I know from my Guinean context, or what I think even some of my fellows expressed, is I think identifying the power structure can be nuanced depending on context. Like when you go to Ghana, for instance, there's a huge power gap. And I think that's cultural. Like if you go to, let's say, Japan, there's this cultural power gap where like your elders are your elders, and like you have to mention someone by all the professorships or like degrees they have. Whereas to, let's say, in the US, it's more like, just call me Mark, or like I'm an email away, or like they ride bikes to their work. It's just different context. So for instance, and the reason why I'm saying that is most of the time when you pitch that to, let's say, for my fellows, they're like, how are we going to do that? Because the power gap is real. There's this real distance between what the people feel they can do as to reaching the people in power. Because like they're very far away from you. They come around in motorcades, like, is that how you call it? Motorcades?
Yes.
So it's like, it's very, whenever you propose that, they're like, how are we going to do that? Because then again, you don't feel like it's reachable.
Sure.
Which I guess you have to go back to the drawing board to figure out ways you could reach that power. And I just wanted to chip that in, that it may look different in different contexts.
Of
Like here, it's
course.
easy to just go petition or email. We do that in classes where we write policy letters to like our county representatives. It's very easy, and you even get replies. But it's very different in different contexts. Like in Ghana, it may take you a while to get replies. You may not even get a reply. So it's very difficult to organize around those contexts, but it's still very crucial. But what I really appreciated when we pitched that or presented that to the fellows is they began to see the tactics that we use in influencing those power structures very differently. Because prior to that, most of us thought like protesting, or in Ghana we call it demonstration, is like a way to get a problem solved. Like you go protest, you hold placards up, and then you demand education, and then that's it. I used to think if you want to solve a problem, you do that, and then like you create awareness. But we train them in such a way that they realize that protesting is not necessarily the end, but it's a means. And you also have to figure out where you're protesting, like who are you trying to put a pressure on when you protest? Are you in the right place? Like if you're protesting in Circle, a place in Ghana, it's called Circle. Is that where the assemblyman for Circle is going to feel the pressure? You have to figure out where he lives, protest by his house or protest. It's like organizing gives you the set of tools that makes you know that protesting by itself is not a way, protesting by itself is not the end, but a means. But you could also do it in a specific way. So in as much as there's still this power gap, the tools and tactics of organizing gives you very tangible ways of closing that gap. It's like you know where to press to get structures changed.
Right.
And I think that is one thing I appreciate so much about the program that we were able to do, because I felt the shift in the Zoom meeting when they were like, oh, interesting. So protesting is not just like taking placards and making your voices heard, but making your voices heard in the places that it will be heard. And I think that's very good.
Absolutely. So protests are important, but protests are not strategic if they don't include a specific concrete demand for change, and if they're not directed towards the actual deciders who can make that change. And that's part of what strategic action is, right? Being clear what the demand is, being clear who can decide. It's true that sometimes you have events where the goal is to build more public awareness and get more people drawn in, but you ultimately have to drive towards a specific concrete demand and make sure you're engaging directly the person or group that can actually realize that demand. That's what makes it not just expressing our opinions, but strategically pursuing the change that we want.
Okay, so Dr. Posadas, I'm listening here. I'm listening to the podcast in my car, and I'm thinking, I want to make actual change. You know, it's easier for me to post something on Facebook or to go to a protest. I have, exams and a life or, kids or whatever it is that I have. And so I only have a couple hours a week or maybe one whole day a month total to be able to try to feel like I can make some community change. I have to go to work. I have things I have to do. I have to go to the grocery store. I have to eat all these things. I have to pay my taxes. So how do I best then use my time? How do I best use myself? If I'm listening to it, I'm thinking, man, I'm not sure then if I'm really making the level of impact I'd like to make, but I do have limited time. What's your suggestion?
So it goes back to, that's why we gather more leaders. We all have limited time and energy. And so the first thing we have to think about is we got to find our team, got to build our team. And then you think about, okay, within this team, given the amount of time we have, what's realistic for us to pursue? Right. You don't have to achieve all of the goals all at once, right? A lot of what matters most, it might take several years, but it's okay to be realistic about the time and energy that is available. What matters more is that we are building relationships and using our time and energy savvily than how quickly we achieve all of the goals, right? That's what's going to sustain us as a community and what's going to be more effective in the long run.
So tell me the last step as we come to a close here today, reflection, super important. I don't know always in some community efforts that I've been engaged in, that iteration of reflection, back to action, back to learning. But like you said, it's not a linear process. So tell me how we do effective reflection.
Yeah. A couple of key questions to always come back to. First of all, well, what's effective and what's not effective for sure. But also, who's part of the conversation, who's not been part of the conversation, right? We know that step 2 is going to be listening all over again. Who do we need to be listening to that we haven't been doing enough listening with?
Right.
And third is, what skills have we built as leaders and what are the next set of skills we need to build? Right? Because it's not just the goals we achieve, but how we build our collective skills to pursue even more goals in the future. So those are some of the questions to be reflecting. And then also, I should say, as part of the reflection, we need to celebrate both what we've achieved, even if we have not won everything we want, we've achieved further steps, and also celebrate why we care about each other. Right? We always want our reflection to include reflecting on the commitment we have to each other. Again, it's that How do we go from anger at what's wrong to the joy we can have together when we create right community?
I love this. I think the network creation, I have realized as part of the Phoenix Generation movement, who is a network of youth who are trying to gain skills and understand how to listen to their own communities, to apply conflict resolution, dialogue skills, et cetera, to their own communities. And when people finish their fellowship and we ask them to talk to us about the impact, the benefit, often they talk about the relationships that they build with other fellows even. And the fact that that person was also going to go into the same major as me, but they were a little bit ahead of me and they were able to share. So the relationships are it. That's the gold, you know? And I think as we really focus some things that I think maybe we're not all that good at, that I know I'm not good at. I admitted on the last episode that I have this reckless enthusiasm, you know? But when I can channel it and we can focus ourselves back on these steps and these questions, we can make such huge impact. And also we can reduce loneliness. We can connect with each other. You know, there's a book that we have here that we've read together by Vivek Murthy, the past Surgeon General of the US. I highly recommend it if you haven't read it, which talks about this feeling of hopelessness, that I can't make real impact in my community, this feeling of lack of connection with others, and how there's a data point in there that just shouldn't have floored me, but it did, that I think about often, which is if I don't feel connected, if I feel lonely, and even when I'm alone, I don't feel like, I like to be alone sometimes. I have a lot of kids and a loud house, but when I'm alone, I feel even in that time, not connected to a community. I'm not connected to a spiritual source. I'm not connected. It's the same as smoking 15 cigarettes a day for your health, for your physical health. And so one thing I love about this community-based work is that you're in community. It sounds like no duh, but it genuinely is one of my favorite parts. Any last parting thought?
I would just say that community organizing, we've thrown out so many terms: strategize, demand. What do we have again? So many, the deciders, who to influence. It may sound like a lot, but I think if you always boil it down to the relationships, as we talked about, because part of finding out what the community wants in the first place is like, hi Lua, I've been thinking about this. It's like, what do you think about it? Do you think it's something that multiple people in the neighborhood has been affected by? What do you think the neighbor, it's mainly about relationships. And then when you're together as a group, it's still again about relationships, but then you're focused on like what to do next about it. I think if there's a key takeaway out of this, is essentially to build community again, to bridge those divides between siloed environment, and then when we are together, figure out ways that we could solve our problems without like burning out or being exhausted because we're trying to do it all by ourselves, or angry at the system and feeling very hopeless because we don't think we have the power to do it. To just capitalize on the relationships that we have.
Wonderful.
Let's go gather more leaders.
Let's do it. I feel it. I feel so grateful, not just today on the podcast to have you as guests, but have worked side by side with both of you a little bit, especially with Derek, as he's tried to make some impact in his own community that he knows about. I've been very inspired about that. And I think we've learned a lot together about what that looks like to make real impact. So thank you so much. And I will say that, you know, if you are listening to this and you are a high school student or you have a high school student, consider also the Changemaker Academy at Stetson University every summer, free camp for students. Amazing experience. Derek has mentored in that program. So we highly encourage it. And there's more information on the Stetson website and on our website as well. So thank you for being a part of the Phoenix Generation and helping us learn how to rise together.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful.